Hello everybody, Larry Young here again with another segment of OLaMan, Living Life with Purity. And today I want to talk about how things are changing and how they've been changing most of my life and how this has gone on. So I was watching a news report the other day and they had a young woman on there. I'll say young, she was in her mid-30s. And apparently she is suing her ex-boyfriend, who they'd had a live-in relationship for 10 years or more. And so she's looking to sue him for her lost years of fertility. Her lost years of fertility. She's blaming him for her staying with him for 10 years and not having children and not getting married. She's a victim. And why does she feel she's a victim? Well, she was told by everyone as she was growing up the same thing that other women were told and was contained in their media messages and their music and their Taylor Swift diet, things like this, that the women need to demand out of the men that the men bring them what it is that they want and they feel they need and deserve out of this relationship. All the while telling the man at other times that I don't need you, I can do this, types of things. So there's been this kind of like need for power and then also to have your defense set up, and they're trying to figure out why the man hasn't asked them to marry them. Because all this time, and I'll tell you from a guy's perspective, and the old saying, if you're going to give the milk away for free type of thing, why should he buy the cow? So the old adage holds up. So the girls are out there and the guys are willing to take it. And so they get into this situation. And back in earlier times, let's put it that way, it wasn't uncommon for young men and women after they graduated high school that you would see that there would be nuptials in the newspaper. They would be 19, maybe 20 years old. It was very, very common, and it was expected. It was the norm, and there were certain priorities that were placed on these things by the parents and the community at large. Rarely did the kids still stay with their parents. They would move out into a mobile home or someplace that they could rent while he had his job at the local lumber yard and things like that. And she was doing whatever, working in an office someplace or trying to eke out a living as a cashier. They're all good jobs. And people were working. They went to work and they were doing their thing. We also, at that time when I was growing up, we were in the midst of the Vietnam War. And the Vietnam War created a certain mix of knowledge and understanding in our population. I think in the 1970s, in the 1960s coming out of, into the 70s, we had a young population and a general population that was much more aware of what was going on around them and why it was and who was affecting them. They knew a lot about their politics. They knew who their mayor was. They knew who the governor was. They knew who the president was. They knew who the people were. And they were out marching in the streets, or they were supporting them by way of getting the facts together and knowing. We also had, at that time, we had 3 TV channels. Maybe if you added PBS in there, if you're lucky to get that, but you had ABC, CBS, and NBC, and maybe PBS. And that was about it. And then you had maybe 2 newspapers in your area. One would be a liberal, one would be more conservative, but it was still kind of a little bit more liberal too. And so there wasn't a whole lot of range of motion in the information spectrum. So everyone was kind of held to a certain level of expectation that the news that was being related to them was credible. It wasn't filtered. It wasn't slanted. But we all kind of knew that it was anyway. But we had an expectation going into that, what it was. Today, we've got thousands and thousands of media sources. We've got deliberate attempts by our media to misinform and outright lie about things, taking like what the BBC did, what CNN has done, what they accused Fox of doing with the Dominion reporting. And I don't know exactly what the facts were in that one, but I knew that there was a lot of opinion, was maybe hyperbole and things like that. But I don't know if we'll really know the full scope of the Dominion voting machine thing for maybe a year or so or a few more elections, because the Dominion voting machines were recently purchased in the last 90 days by a conservative, much like Elon Musk buying Twitter and making it free and open as X. Somebody has now bought the Dominion voting machine company. It used to be owned by liberals. Now it's owned by a conservative. And a lot of people aren't thinking about what could be the outcome of this. Well, we're going to find out. We may find out that things were quite shady. And now you have a lot of people on the Democratic side are saying that we can't really trust the voting machines. You see how the pendulum swings back and forth this way and that way. Well, back to our young woman who wants to sue her ex-boyfriend of 10 years. This woman was on the career track. She had the "I don't need you" messages to him. And it's no wonder to me why the guy decided to walk away after 10 years when she said either put a ring on it or we're done. He said, okay, I'll go back to my Xbox and Pornhub, see you later. He goes back out to the bar and he's got another gal on his arm and in his bed in not any more than 72 hours. She's crying. She's angry. She's upset. Probably rightfully so. She should be pretty pissed off at herself for letting herself devalue herself that much. The old free milk from the cow thing. So now he's at home with Xbox, a pizza box, and Pornhub, and she's going off to a Midwestern state to a fertility clinic to have her eggs harvested and frozen, so that when she deems that it's time and necessary, she can come back and get the old squirt and get set up to maybe have babies here. So a lot of people are saying that this is because men's brains don't come into maturity until they're 25 years old. I may say a little bit later in some of us. I mean, like I've said, we're born stupid. Okay? We're guys. All right? We don't have all the keys to the universe like you women do. But I'm just kidding. We do have keys. We just don't share them with you. But we have these brains not developing. And so they're wanting to question the capability of young men and women to make decisions before the age of 25. So when it comes to relationships, they want to blame it on the age factor and saying that they're not mature enough to make a qualified decision. Okay, I'll accept that. What are we going to do about it? Well, we might want to roll back the clock and the age limits on voting, because as time has gone on, in 1971, for you historians may understand that we passed, the country did, the 26th Amendment. And the 26th Amendment rolled the voting age back from 21 to 18 nationally. And the reason for that is because we were involved in the Vietnam War, and we had a draft. And young men were being pulled out after they finished their high school, and if they didn't go to college and they weren't involved in some path towards getting more education, they were eligible to be drafted by Uncle Sam to take and be sent over to Vietnam or to be put in active service around the world. So this was a common thing. And at that time in the 1970s, it wasn't uncommon for people to be right out of high school, getting married, 18 to 20 years old, because Johnny's going to be going off to war and Diane's going to be staying at home. And many times she wanted a baby to be taking care of things, as did he, because he didn't know if he was going to be coming home. And as natural instincts would say, he wanted to have somebody to carry on if he didn't make it back. This is natural male drive. It's what we do. One of the things we do. So we used to have people getting married at 18, 20 years old. Their brains weren't any real different, but the expectations around us were altogether different than they are today. So that was the one fundamental thing that was different at that time. But nowadays, you've got people voting that as they come out of the polls, if they try to have them do a basic civics exam, only 22% of the people exiting the polls can pass the exam. And it's higher concentration in our younger ages than it is in our older ones, but the older ones are pretty dumb about things too. They're just not aware because they haven't concentrated on it. The information's out there, they just don't pay attention to it. They're going in and not voting with facts so much as they're going in and voting with feelings, because feelings have become the new physical reality for too many people. So it used to be back in 1971, after all the protests of the 1960s, I think it was well-deserved. The cry was, if you're old enough to die for your country, you're old enough to vote for who's sending you out to die. And I understood that, and I agreed with it, as did everybody. It passed overwhelmingly. Well, that was over 50 years ago. And it was over 50 years ago also that the United States ended the draft. So we don't have a draft anymore. And so we don't have this powerful, consequential demise of our young men at the age of 18. So we also don't have young men and women who know what county they live in, or who their mayor is, or who their governor is. They may know who the president is, but they can't tell you who any of their cabinet members are. They just don't know, because they're not working off of facts, they're working off their feelings. So it may be time to do what we do at the Department of Motor Vehicles when people want to get a driver's license. We have them pass a test, a basic test. Maybe it's 100 questions, it depends on the state, but you have to get a certain score in order to qualify to get the driver's license. Well, exclusive of, they have a whole different set of ideas out there. And they're giving licenses to just about anyone who's got $200 and a beating heart. So they don't care if you can speak English or not. They're going to give you a driver's license and send you to work. Problematic all the way around. So if you wouldn't let somebody on the road, why would you let them into the voting booth if they don't know much more than what day of the week it is? So we can't be voting off of feelings. We have to have some level of intelligence going on in there that lets you know what the facts of the matter are and what you're voting on, these weighty issues. So I submit that we might want to be looking at raising the voting age back to 21 at least, and then see what happens from that. Because right now we've kind of got ourselves in a pickle. And the same thing with our women. They need to learn not just how to expect more out of the men and expect excellence out of these guys, which I fully agree with, but they need to understand what it takes to take care of a man. They're not taught that. And a lot of them don't want to learn that, because what it makes them have to do is to give up some of their power in this relationship that they think they are so tied to. They want all the stuff. They want all the accolades, all the comments and things like that. But rarely do they speak up and say, thank you. I really appreciated that. I appreciate having you in my life. I don't know how life would be without you. Well, because they didn't do that earlier on and kind of help cement this man in their life, they lost him because they never knew who they were in themselves. And so what we need to do is get all these young people back to understanding that life isn't just about your emotions and your feelings. It's about the physical hard work and the risks that go with that. Our young men and women in the 1960s and 70s understood this all too well because they were paying for the mistakes of their politicians with their lives and their bodies. Right now, it's just your feelings. In the meantime, I love you, and I'll be back.